We are live.
Good evening. This is the Council Rock School District Policy Committee for Thursday, January 26, 2017. Despite what the agenda says, we are not time traveling tonight. So this is a school board. I am the committee chair, Jerry Grupp. We're now going to go around the table and allow each person visiting to explain who they are.
Mike Thorward, board member.
Mark Bialik, board member.
Abigail O'Keefe, district parent.
Karen Selby, and I'm a district parent as well.
Ed Tate, board member.
Denise Brooks, board member.
Angie Block, board member.
Sue Elliott, Assistant Superintendent.
Barry Desko, Director of K-12 Education.
Matt Frederickson, IT director.
Wendy Thomas, board.
And we also have with us tonight, they have stepped out of the room to do some stuff to get some papers for the board. Mr. Papazian, who is part of the educational staff of the district, and Dr. Robert Fraser, who is the school district superintendent. We have a number of policies before us tonight. Some of these are carryover from last month, December, that we didn't have time to get to. We are in the process, Barry, you'll forgive us, we're in the process of getting the paperwork around 137, 137.1. So for the time being, we're going to drop over onto the January agenda of 111 lesson plans, go through that. As soon as we complete, at any break point we have, we're going to drop right back to the homeschool discussions. Dr. Elliott, I think you were going to talk about lesson plans for us tonight.
Yes, so the policy as recommended by PSEA, the only change that I recommend that we make to this policy is the very last line or sentence of the delegation of responsibility section, where in the original policy that we had in was plan books must remain in the teacher's desk instead of saying plan books, just to say plans. And the reason for that is because not all teachers might have a physical plan book. They might have things electronically that they print out rather than just a typical spiral bound book. So that's the only change that I recommend for that particular policy.
Any other comment or discussion?
Do we have, we don't have a standard that we use throughout the district?
As in standard type of lesson plan or?
No, a book. I don't
No.
care, I just was curious.
Yep, no. Teachers can use what works best for them, as
And-
long as they have plans and they're available as the policy says.
And I am interested in two things and in this aspect. One is we have now created some software or adopted some software that supports maintaining lesson plans over time. We have something which is how we share lesson plans between teachers. Are those not, what are we sharing between?
The software that we're building curriculum has the ability for teachers to develop their own lesson plans. It's not a requirement for them to use.
Okay.
And we're really not even far enough along in the use of that system for them to move forward with that. Some are using it, but we're not using, it's not mandated. And I would say that it's being used by a relatively small number of our staff members.
So I guess my challenge here, thank you for that. My challenge here is that now you've crossed out the word books and it says, so it's just plans must remain in the teacher's desk overnight. And my question is that anachronistic as in and of itself, which is, are they storing them electronically or are they storing them as paper? So that if Mr. Papazian was not in today and had lesson plans, would I really expect Mr. Papazian's plans to be in his desk, or would they be storing them electronically in a place that then the coordinator in the district or somebody could allow me to get to them? So is the thought that they are actually in a desk, because some teachers are, I don't call them itinerant teachers, but some people are moving around, and where's their lesson plan going to be?
Well, they would have a home base or a spot where they would, whether it's a desk in an IPC or, a space in the building where this is kind of their home base where they put their things, that would be where their plans or their materials should be for a substitute.
So I just ask you if it's anachronistic to say that they're going to be in the desk, because are they in the desk? And that's why, Barry, I was asking about the other aspect of it. So I'm okay with the general form. I'd like to see it changed. I don't know that we need to craft the exact wording of that aspect of it, but I think you get the flavor. For me, what would be important And the second thing about that is that the lesson plans are the property of the district? Are they not? Or are they the property of the
Yes.
teacher?
Yes.
No.
I'd just like them to be
Yes.
stated somewhere in this, that lesson plans are the property of the district. And do we retain them after they've been used? So is there a history? So if we went back and said, as part of an evaluation of teacher or teaching capabilities, or even as we're looking at learning, I get them wrong, PLCs, no, right, professional learning communities. That's something which I think is a resource that when you say, hey, look, it was successful, how do we look at the history of the lesson plans for that successful experience? So I want to make sure that they are both the property of the district and that they're retained. I don't want to specify the modality of retaining them. Matt's going to talk to us for some other time in the near future about SharePoint or Board Docs or some other tools. But I want a tool that, if we're keeping them historically so we can understand. So I don't know if it has to be policy, but you understand where I'm getting to with that it's certainly that the property of the district must be stated. I don't want some teacher to say, oh, it's mine. Can't imagine that happening, but you never know. They're the property of the district. We paid for the teacher to create them and they're ours. Other than that, I'm fine with this. I don't think those are substantive changes that would hold it up. I think you can craft between now and then the rough off, take the edges off of what I've observed, if that's okay with everybody. I see anybody's objecting to that. I get nods all the way in agreement. So I'll leave it to you to take the edges off those little bits and then we'll go forward with it.
So first read?
With the, she can make the change. I'm not gonna,
This is
this is the first read.
No, I mean so this would be for board approval. right?
This would be for board approval. I'll trust the administration those are subtle points to.
We'll get with the appropriate lead time to be able to read through and make sure everything's there and ask questions.
Exactly. And it's not substantive changes even if we do it there. We're good? So 111 will come forward for approval. Where are we on our paper? Mr. Papazian is still working on the
He's
paper.
making copies right now. So.
No problem. Let's talk about career and technical education for a few minutes. Board Policy 115, Dr. Elliott.
All right, so for this policy, we did get a little bit of feedback from Mr. Foster about some suggestions for some wording in this policy.
Sorry, what policy are we on?
115.
115. And the intent of this policy is to really focus on multiple opportunities for career and technical education, not solely MBIT, which is stated in the authority section. It's the second to last paragraph. It talks about the opportunities that the board will support that may include attending Middle Bucks Institute of Technology for different programs there, internships or work study programs. So it lists 3 possibilities of ways that students can gain experience in career and technical education. So the suggestions that Mr. Foster offered that related specifically to adding a lot of additional data or bullet points about MBIT don't really fit with this policy because that makes the policy a little bit more like it's all about Middle Bucks and not about other opportunities. So it's not appropriate in my recommendation to have those as part of this policy. And other than that, I have no recommended changes for this policy.
Can you give an example of just a couple of the bullet items?
Absolutely. So some of the bulleted items were things like supporting the superintendent's participation in professional advisory meetings at NBIT, having a student from NBIT be on the advisory board at our board presentations were some of the examples of the additional bullet points that were suggested.
Yeah, I just want to get very
Can I
clear.
take a moment to share personal experience?
Right.
May I?
Sure, why not?
My daughter is a ninth grader in Wilson. And they came in, NBIT came in to do their presentation. And my daughter was very moved, and very impressed by their presentation as I was when they came to our academic standards committee meeting. And came home, and so now this is recorded, so I'm trying to choose my words carefully. to not violate her privacy, but I don't think she would mind that I would. She was amazed at what a wonderful presentation it was and how poorly it was received among the students. And the number of students that said their parents would kill them if they participated. She understood. Imagine going to college for graphic design and you come out with a certificate that you can master Adobe Illustrator. So while I understand the concerns and respect them, I think any education that we do with regard to NBIC should be geared to our parents who are sending the message to their children that this is not a viable option. I mean, we could have kids who are going to major in education with 3 years of experience in childcare before they get to college. So I agree with Dr. Foster. This is a wonderful program. I agree we're doing a great job. I don't know how to change the perception from the parents that this is an acceptable and viable and fantastic approach for kids who know their career path early on and want to add to their resume before they submit a college application. So, by my child's count, we did a great job of saying this is the program, this is what is offered, these are the things that are offered to you. And I'm not being defensive of this district. This was her, she came home and said, I can't believe that I was the only, she felt like she was the only one. Whether she was the only one, I don't know. But she felt as if she was the only one. And she felt that the folks that came and presented and talked did an amazing job. And the kids couldn't hear it. So whatever we have to do to ensure the kids hear it, or maybe it's a parent program, I don't know. But I do feel that from my 9th grader's interpretation, we did a great job of putting something in front of her that she heard. I have one 9th grader, there are many. She was amazed at everybody else's perception. So I don't know how we got it.
Well, and I guess there's a question here, and that's, today, I was amazed to find in my email this morning, a 2-page missive from Dr. Foster pointing out his bit-by-bit concerns on some policies. What amazed me was not that he had done it. What amazed me was that over a week ago at a board meeting, he said, look, we got the policies in our hands last week. And then today sends the notice and asks that the board incorporate them into the meeting. So all I will ask is going forward, if you have something that you want to incorporate into the meeting and you can't make the meeting, that you communicate it to other board members in advance of the meeting, a little more than the same day, because I thank Dr. Elliott. You know, many of us work during the day, and Dr. Elliott took the time to go through this bit by bit to line these up with what's going on. So, if you can't make a meeting, asking for something to be read into the record or sending, communicate with another board member, with whom you're partnered somehow or have a coalition or a light way of thinking, and ask them to bring it forward. But, so I applaud Dr. Elliott for having reviewed these things at depth. It's interesting to me in the authority that this says, and I don't mean to contradict, although she walked away now, Kyle, the second part of the authority says, prepare students for enrollment in post-secondary education programs. And that's fine, but for some students, we actually prepare them to enter the workforce, and it can go either way. And so it's not wholly and distinctly for those students who want to go on, because I think we need to be aware that some students, this is where they want to attain. They know what they want to do, and it's not post-secondary education. No, I'm not contradicting you.
No, I know that you're not. I simply want to say, what I feel like I've observed all along, and what we've all talked about all along, is that this we can do everything as a district that we're doing. And I do believe the district has ramped up their efforts to present. And, you know, we are talking about perceptions among kids, and we are talking about perceptions among parents. If we want to do a better job of promoting these programs and their value, because I think we're doing a good job of doing that, I think we have to hit the parents.
That's fine,
my.
but I don't think it requires a board policy.
Of course not.
Okay.
Of course
That
not.
was my point. I think we're straying off. I think your comments are really great, and it's something we can tackle at another time. Before the meeting, I said to Barry, I met with Kathy Strauss as the board chairman for MBIT this year, and we have some goals we set for Council Out. And one of them is our goal is to double the enrollment in the next 3 years, right? That's an aggressive goal, but I want to work with Barry on that. But beyond that, I don't think we can address that education process and how it energize kids and parents in policy. So that's my point.
I agree.
agree.
I was raising it merely as a matter of,
And so, from my perspective, I was amazed that so much of this regards child abuse clearances and obligations around that, given that we're going to an approved educational facility, you know.
Right.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah,
So in this, it could be MBIT, it could be something else, it could be work study, it could be an internship.
That's why it's all there.
So
Yes.
you're basically, this basically says that whoever they're with has to be approved, has to have the appropriate clearances. What struck me is failure to accurately report an arrest or conviction may subject the identified adult to disciplinary action up to and including termination. So now we're imposing something on a business that we may not be able to actually execute. I'm more concerned about if we find out that somebody's reported something or done something, we get the kid out of their care. Not that the person, I mean, I'd like to think the person gets fired, but I'd be more focused on what happens with the child than what happens with the employee. So I'm just.
the answer there is that the key word there is that it's may subject. And if it's within our domain to terminate them, that would be where the may comes in.
Right.
But certainly, and I say the word a lot today, the criminal prosecution, whether they're our employer or anyone's employer, that criminal prosecution is not tied to employment. That's tied to failure to report, and it's wholly the discretion of the district attorney. So the may is.
So this would apply to.
If you went to work if somehow we had a work study program at a local garage,
Right.
and that person failed to report,
Right.
certainly they own the garage. We couldn't fire them. They were doing it pro bono.
Well, they don't work for it, we get.
Exactly.
We get-
But the district attorney could choose to escalate that and pursue it as a criminal matter. That's a may. That's why it's a may. Lastly, and just I don't have any other complexities other than that one about that some students might choose not to consider to go on post-secondary. I don't think it's a major to do. I'll leave it as it is. But lastly, and to summarize the conversation, I believe that I think it's appropriate for MBIT and to try and persuade children to go to MBIT. The key phrase is where it's appropriate for them, where they choose and it matches their desires and that of their family. That's as far as, so I applaud Kathy's ideas to double the enrollment.
That's my idea.
Okay, I'll still applaud it. I know you'll take credit for it. No, I'm kidding. But I would hope that we send 100% of the children to the program who choose it and think it's appropriate. And that's, if that's what it is, that's what it is.
I'm going to keep my comments to myself because we're talking about policy. We'll have that
That's fine.
discussion another time, Jerry.
That's fine.
I was gonna say, perhaps my comments were out of turn.
Anybody have an objection to the policy 115 as it's presented this evening? That would bar it from being read as a second read and adoption of the next meeting. No objection, so that's gonna go forward. Matt, we're now gonna step aside and step back to the 137 and 137.1. We'll take them. Barry, you're gonna lead that part of the discussion?
Sure.
Everybody has the agenda or the topics we're distributed?
Barry, I sent an email to, did you see a copy of that email? I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
Dr.
I did
Frazier
not.
forwarded it
Okay,
to me,
I
yes.
didn't think about forwarding to that.
That's okay.
Should have.
So, beginning in 1988, the legislature created a home education policy and over the course of time has included some updates and changes to that program. What PSBA has provided for us is, through their model policy, is really kind of defines what is currently in place for a home education program, and Council Rock complies with what is written within the law as it's defined. What Mr. Bialik is referencing is that there were a couple of suggestions, if that's a fair term, that we might want to consider in terms of some of the language that's used. I don't think it changes the intent of the policy, so it would really be the board's prerogative if those changes are acceptable. But ultimately, just in short, so people get a sense of how home education is handled, when a parent makes a request to begin a home education program, we send them and direct them to the Pennsylvania Department of Education site, because there's some clarity to the program, and they actually provide some sample affidavits that a parent can use. When a parent sends the appropriate documentation to the district, then they receive a letter from us that they are approved for a home education program. They may request of the district the textbooks that we utilize and some of the supplemental materials for that program. At the end of the school year, they are required to submit a documentation from someone who is certified to do so, that the program was acceptable and completed to an appropriate standard. That was a change recently, about 2 years ago, where that portfolio was required to be submitted to the district for our review to see if it was acceptable. That was removed in the legislation, so now it's really just a document of the homeschool person who's doing the evaluation to send that to us, and then they receive a letter that we've received that and their program is in order. So that's kind of a short version of the practice that this policy speaks to.
There were some recommended changes. Mr. Bialik had made use of an organization, which I believe is a coalition or somehow supporting of homeschool, who had done the review through their legal department and had some suggested changes or observations. Were those, have you contemplated those?
Well, again, and Mr. Bialik, maybe you can, speak to
I'd
that.
be good to know if they were.
Okay.
I'd be good to know if they were.
Okay, so the first one was, this is from the HSLDA, which is an advocacy and what's the other word I'm thinking of? Legal defense group for homeschool. And I'll say that Council Rock has a strong history of being a very helpful and I'll just say good district to work with for homeschool families. I think everybody would agree with that. You hear horror stories around the state.
I share that with anybody who asks.
That's good to hear. But so the HSLDA recommended under delegation of responsibility, the proposed policy reads: the superintendent or designee shall develop and distribute administrative regulations for registering and monitoring home education programs. The thought is that the district really doesn't have the authority to do anything more than what the statute says. So, and I'll just read you what they say. Please note that home education programs are governed exclusively by the provisions of the statute. It references the statute. Thus, any local policy cannot add or contradict the provisions of the statutory law. There is no statutory grant of authority to superintendents or school boards to create binding administrative regulations. That being said, they do play an administrative role. So, as Barry said, the administrative role is accepting that documentation, right? In this case. It seems the whole section could be removed. It's not really accurate, and they said what purposes it would serve. So,
I guess because I considered that when I saw it this morning, the administrative regs. So take by example that it says in the notarized affidavit that someone has to deliver, and annually thereafter it's supposed to be delivered. How the affidavit, the notarized affidavit, has to be delivered. The administrative regs or administrative detail that the district could propose is simply could be as simple as to whom to deliver it and where that person is. Because otherwise, this this document that we read here which is coming from the law, is good, but it doesn't tell how to effectuate that. How to actually, so to how does it get delivered? Does it come into the tax office? I'm just saying, particularly if you're not associated strongly or much with the school district and you're working a little bit outside of the district, as is appropriate for you, where do you get who to contact? Who's your contact? You want to borrow materials, and the law says we have to provide materials. Who do we lend? How do you get to them? Do you go to the principal? That's the big wrong thing. So I think that, and you can contradict me, but to me, that's the nature of the administrative portion, which says we're willing to cooperate. I think we have historically, but here's who you talk to and what you do.
To me, is that we're not required to do it, as Mark says, but I think in the spirit of support and respect, that we're trying to create the best environment that we can. So it's only a value add if somebody chooses not to, participate, or we don't need it because of rate, that's fine. I think we're just going one extra length that we don't necessarily need to in order to provide the best experience possible. So, put in there or not, doesn't matter. I think we should still do it. So why not put it in there? It doesn't matter that it's not.
If my interpretation is not what the district's thought was, as you reviewed this, then let us know. But that was where my interpretation was as I saw this.
Well, some of those things, I'll give you an example. You cited about the books, materials. So when we issue a letter back to the family approving the program, we write in that letter, if you're interested in materials, and we list the school that would serve that residence, and say you can contact the principal of this school. And our principals recognize that if they receive that call, they get a copy of the letter, so that could be happening. They then just contact the school and say, can we have the algebra book, and we have the social studies book. They collect the materials, the parent comes in and picks them up, signs them out, and moves on and keeps them for the year. So some of what is spoken to about us putting together some regulations are really just practices that we currently follow, and we build within our documentation back and forth with the family. So whether you want it in policy, I guess, is really up to you, but it's a practice that we follow, though.
It's a guideline, or it's,
Well, that's a requirement. We have to
Right.
provide those materials. So I think what I was speaking to for Mr. Gruppins, he said, like, how does a parent know where to go for those? We issue that in the letter approving the program, saying that if you want materials, contact this principal at this school.
I heard Mark say this is solely governed by state law. Now, you hear this every time we do policies. If it's solely governed by state law, why are we creating a policy at all?
You asked that of PSBA. That's all I was looking to you for, so you may want to.
Seriously, I mean,
Yeah, no, I hear you.
if we can't have any say in this, then we shouldn't, and that's okay.
Yeah, Mac contact.
If it helps something, that's fine, but if it's a positive thing.
Their recommendation, the SBA's recommendation, is that we have these policies to help clarify how these processes should work.
Okay, that's good enough.
I think we're said another way, as a member of the public, and go look at state regs. So they'll go straight to our policy to find the information.
In part,
It's an information guide.
some policies and you're right, many of the policies is codified law, it's the law. Some of the policies we write are also codified so that our staff has an understanding of what's going on a little more clearly than, telling our staff, go look in the law. Well, that's not going to work. That's not going to cut it. So when a parent shows up at the school and says, this is what I'm doing and I need cooperation, I don't know. They look at the policy. Look, there's a policy. Oh, look. I would hope they don't have to say, oh, look. But it's also, some of them are for our reference, so our people do the right thing.
but it comes with our support and our blessing.
Agreed.
It's a
So
reference
it sends a
point.
message, correct?
So Kyle just looked at me and I'll say,
I am looking,
I
I'm
think
sorry,
that-
but
that's
you're the
okay.
most valuable
So-
person here in the room.
all right. So I think it should be stricken because I think it can, although our intention may be good, I think it can be looked at as though a superintendent has or the board has the ability to create more administrative regulations for homeschool education programs. That's what the statute is, and I think that that's the concern. So to someone's point, the policy should, Dr. Thorwald said this, the policy should say something like, we will follow the statute and list the statute, and because the statute isn't vague at all, it says exactly what you should do, and so. That's the concern. And again, it's not a reflection on Council Rock, but there have been absolute horror stories throughout the country and Pennsylvania.
If you will, let me craft the middle ground, which changes the word regulation to processes. Because that takes out, that's just telling people what our process is, and distributed administrative processes. It's not, you're right, the word regulation is probably an overstep. That we have processes that we tell people about, that's fine. They're still bound by the regulation, but these are the process that we use to follow this regulation.
Well, so for the registering, monitoring, home education programs also is concerning to me if we're going to keep any of it. So if it was administrative processes, internal administrative processes for adherence to the statute and follow the statute, that would be that would be okay with me. I don't know if anyone else, are we allowing?
Internal, I don't care. I mean, internal, you're going to tell people who to contact and whatever you want to do. I'll defer to you.
And the point of if a homeschool parent is going to go look at the act or look at the policy, I would say 99% of the time they're going to go look at the act. Right? And because I would say any homeschool mom, especially, I don't want to say the dads aren't doing it, but they probably know exactly where to find that act and probably have copies.
So you want to make
Moms are
internal
much more thorough
processes?
than dads.
So this is what I think I heard you say. So the change in the language, the superintendent or designee shall develop and distribute internal administrative processes for adherence to the statute.
That works for me. Administrative.
Yep.
Anybody else?
I just about processes.
PROs, yeah, you got it, yes.
That was really
I'm sorry, so what was that process for?
Where are you? For adherence to the statute.
Yeah.
Get rid of the rest of it. Yeah.
If you want to quote the statute, I can give it to you. And no, you don't need to do that because it's done elsewhere.
I think it's done several times.
Okay.
You have another observation that came from
Yeah,
that?
under notarized affidavit, the comment reads, while affidavits must be received prior to August 1st, there is no statutory requirement that they be received after July 1st. That being said, I understand that for convenience, the district may wish to have them received during this time frame. This would be a low priority change, so I don't know if you want to talk about that or. Is that what it is? It's just a convenience thing?
For us, it is when there's these deadlines that just allow us to start contacting parents if they're, slow in getting information back to us. So really how it's handled in practice is Kathy Tasker makes contact with parents either through email or phone call and just say, hey, remember you need to get your materials. And that continues. And then if it gets too late, then she'll usually contact me and say, I'm having difficulty getting, it's September now and we still haven't received information. So again, we try to be as cooperative as we can. I mean, what the law states is what it states. We just try to work with parents. And sometimes you're saying we've had people whose evaluators kind of left town. They say, I'm struggling to find a new evaluator. So at least we know. So for us, it's just trying to get information about where things stand and work with families to try to wrap up get a school year started or wrap up a school year.
So this window starts a process for you just to make sure we
That's
don't
what it is
leave
for us.
anybody behind.
So whether it's in or out doesn't matter.
In that same section about the affidavit, that first paragraph, I'm fine with it. The second paragraph there, really just, that's a portion of the law specifically, and the reason I call it out is because it says, and criminal offenses, but it doesn't enumerate the severity or the coding.
Actually, it does.
Well, no, it
The
doesn't.
law
In-
does.
written
I know-
here, it
well,
doesn't.
Let me go on to the next comment.
Oh, go ahead.
In paragraph 2, it does recommend that add the word certain criminal offenses.
Well, I was actually just going to say, why don't we strike that entire second paragraph and just add the kicker on the setting forth the information required by law and in conformance with the law. And that way, the law
All defined.
requires who's to sign it and
And we're not regurgitating.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
At the end of the sentence, required by law and in conformance with the law. into that line. And then the next
If
paragraph.
the law changes in the statute.
Then I don't need to do
Covered.
anything. Exactly. Oh, okay, that was the same, I'm sorry, that was the same thing that time.
And we'll just strike the, that
Yeah,
paragraph.
the whole rest of the discussion, yeah. Have another observation?
I do. So under student portfolio and evaluations, I think this is just to clarify. So the proposed policy reads, for each student participating in the home education program, the supervisor shall, number one, maintain a portfolio of records and material. Number two, provide an annual written evaluation of the student's educational progress. And then the paragraph below it reads, documentation required by this policy shall be provided to the school district superintendent or designee at the conclusion of each school year. The way I'm reading the comment by the HSLBA is that this documentation required by this policy shall be provided to the school district. They seem to be reading it that the school district is also asking for the portfolio, which Barry already said we are not. But they just wrote, the annual evaluation of student progress is to be written by a qualified person, usually a certified teacher. The supervisor must only maintain a portfolio of records and materials per the statute. No documentation from the portfolio must be submitted to the school district. It used to be required, eliminated in 2014. So he said the last sentence of this section should just be deleted. So you really could just delete that section.
The part where it says documentation required by this policy? Yeah, okay. Because you're right, we just accept the evaluation.
Take out the
Remove
both
that whole
lines.
sentence?
That sentence there, I don't know that it's necessary. It says what has to happen in numbers
Right,
one
it
and
just
two.
adds a point of possible confusion, I think, so just delete it. And then that's it for that policy, then the other comments are under 137.1.
I had a question about this, and
This
You know-
still on 137?
yeah, on the same one. You know, there is a discussion about diplomas, and this policy says, students who complete all the graduation requirements of the home education program shall receive a high school diploma issued by the supervisor or an approved diploma granting organization. And so I guess my question is, what is the school district's role? Now, obviously, if they were homeschooled, that supervisor could issue a diploma, however they craft it. Or approved diploma granting organization. Does that place a burden or an obligation on the district to issue a diploma to that student? Okay, I just wanted to understand
I do
that.
not.
Okay,
Now, the statute from 2014, it requires that any diploma issued by the supervisor or one of these diploma granting organizations holds the same weight as a diploma issued by Council Rock or any public school.
It just doesn't say council.
It
They don't say.
well, no,
it's not
and,
gonna council rock.
and I'll say this, and if it sounds like hubris, then I apologize, but it is something, we've worked for many years, and we've talked about the value of the Council Rock education and what the transcripts mean and what universities and post-secondary education looks at in terms of evaluating a student based on what Council Rock means. Now, certainly a homeschool program may be as good, may be better, it may not be as good, but I just want to understand, I hate to say a brand, but that the product at the end, which is the graduated, educated student, comes with the imperature of the school district, if it has that name on it. That was the nature of my query about who's the issuing agency.
Yeah, it's not us.
That was. Any other commentary or questions about that?
I have.
Oh, wait, yeah, I'm sorry.
Are you, what I.
We normally, let me back up. We normally don't have public comment at this point. Normally was the key word there. But we had people come specifically for this topic today, so we're going to kind of break with process and allow the people who came on these two to be part of the conversation.
Well, thank you very much for letting me address the committee here. I'm Aggie O'Keefe, and I have 5 kids in the district since 2007. Some are regular enrollment and some are homeschooled, and they do go in for extracurriculars. So when I saw the email come out saying that you would be discussing this at the meeting, I thought that I might be, in a good position to at least flush out what's really happening I'm sure you know, but just, from the parent and the family's perspective. So I did read through some of the proposed guidelines, specifically about extracurriculars. I have a son who's.
That's the next one.
That's gonna be the next policy.
Yeah, so she'll do it as introduction.
That's fine,
Okay, so.
but can I just ask if
The cart's
anybody?
ahead of the horse.
Yeah, can you just ask if anybody has comments about the one we're moving away from first?
Okay, I'm sorry. So Keith,
Do you
we'll
mind
come back to you.
coming back if someone has comments about? the
We'll
one
be fair.
we
We'll come back to you on the
Absolutely.
co-curricular.
Yeah.
Anyone who's attending specifically around 137 have any comments following the discussion? You're
So are you saying that if a student who is in an approved home education program would want a diploma from Council Rock, they could not get one?
Correct. Council Rock doesn't grant a diploma because the credits earned, so to speak, were not done through Council Rock. What we have done at request is if there has been a request from a family for us to document that a student was a resident of Council Rock, completed X number of years of the home education program, and within compliance of the law, we would write a letter, but it's not a diploma.
Thank you.
Could we do that if we wanted to?
Give it the
Issue a
diploma?
diploma?
Diploma, home education, Council Rock home education diploma?
I guess you could. I think it would be, I think it would require a lot of conversation because, we don't, in this day and age, there are a lot of different ways in which students are able to gain credits and courses and grades. And it's a nightmare trying to balance what is acceptable and meets what we expect and require of our students within the schools. And that would be a difficult conversation because I think it would open it to a much broader conversation than just home education. I think you start looking at students who take summer courses in a community college or an online virtual course that's not through Council Rock, what then qualifies it to be an accredited institution versus any other institution. It's pretty complex.
And well, then to go down that path, I asked the question, although it's not of the policy, it may affect what we think we're doing with the policy. One of our visitors this evening had spoken of that her children had been in Council Rock through a certain grade and then chose to be homeschooled thereafter. And it's not entirely beyond the realm of possibility that someone might take the other path, that they might be homeschooled for, let's just say, a high school student, grades 9 and 10, and then transfer in for grades 11 and 12. So we accept that and we somehow arrange.
I want to be honest with you.
Never
If you
encountered
could transfer
someone.
in, yeah, we have. I mean, you can transfer in as a 12th grade student and earn a Council Rock diploma because what would happen is what would be provided to us as the evaluation and documentation of courses, as long as the courses that were taken met the Council Rock requirements and the number of credits that we require for graduation. If they finish their senior year, we would clean that up when a student registers to come in, and they would take the courses of their senior year and would graduate. No different than moving from another school district and coming in.
That's fine.
Yes.
Well, based on the question, at the end of the table is I was trying to figure out how that integrates over time.
I was under the understanding that the students are allowed to walk at the graduation in the district.
I got to be honest with you. If they have, I don't think it's ever been asked of me. So I wouldn't want to speak for the principals if they've ever had that asked of them and permitted it. I'm not aware of it. I mean, I could check into that, but I don't know off the top of my
But
head.
that's a ceremony to confer the diploma of the district upon the student. And also
We're not issuing the diploma.
well,
So we're not conferring it either. I guess.
right, that's my point.
That's not to say it's not a discussion, but I agree, if we are not issuing the diploma.
Even the attestation of the superintendent at that ceremony, that's an attestation there's a public attestation by the superintendent making representations to the board regarding the person seated in front of us. That would not apply to the persons visiting.
We did not actually technically
No.
That's my point. It's, yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not a discussion,
No, I have no feelings about it.
but
I just
technically,
say,
we stand
had the
and
moms
defer
and
to
dads
the
come up and,
confer a diploma. We are conferring within certain.
I got you, yeah, I completely understand.
Yeah,
And I'll say to you-
conversation to change that.
I'll say to you in practice, people have,
Yeah.
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 now, and I'll say to you in practice that students register at any, I mean, I use the example of coming in September of a senior year. You come in the second semester of a senior year. It really doesn't make a difference when you come in. If students meet our graduation requirements and are registered and enrolled in Council Rock and earn the necessary credits and our requirements specifically for Council Rock, they graduate with a Council Rock diploma. I mean, you can come in from a local school district in May and we check to see if you meet Council Rock graduation requirements and you can earn a Council Rock diploma.
And I don't know how we could not do that.
You can, you must do it.
Yeah, that seems like a workaround.
But I mean,
Which
when
I
you
get.
have a final, and if you want to be registered in class, you're gonna have to take those finals, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
can't just say I'm registered and then not go to class.
Yeah,
And the graduation.
Right, so
We're
I mean, if they come
gonna
in
have to make up the work, yeah,
Their
yeah.
classes and they pass their finals and they.
All right.
I would say, if there was just put a point in this conversation, I'm willing to bet that there probably aren't many people in the homeschool community that would be interested in that. I think if they wanted their kids to have a Council Rock diploma, then they're in the public
Right.
school, that's my
Agreed.
guess.
Right.
So,
All
I
right.
don't think that it's something.
So I think, but just, I think this is the right way to have these conversations. It's the right way to get clarification for the board about the rules of the law. It may not be exactly on point for some of this. Anybody have, we're, go ahead.
About borrowing material from school district. Because I only tried this once to contact a principal to check out some textbook, but I think I contacted her at the busiest time of the year, the beginning of the school year. So I'm just trying to figure out like the best way to. Because by the time that I contact the principal, she has to go back to teacher to see if there are any extra material. Because she might already order, she might already receive know the number of students and order the material. So she was not sure if there are extra material that we can borrow.
As a policy, we say you can, and that's sort of to the point we were talking about before about how does that line of communication and who to talk to and when, it's not a rule. Obviously, if you came in the middle of the year and said, I need to borrow a textbook, you can do that. But we can have best practices that we communicate who you talk to, where you talk to. So you
So
point.
we always start with the principal.
Yes, and if they didn't have a textbook, let's say, because they had issued all of what they had, we would contact a sister school and see who had an extra one and get it to you. So there's always at least another one somewhere.
Board members will go in for second for approval at the next meeting with the changes we made tonight. Very good. We're now going to.
Question, how many homeschool students does our district have?
Okay.
You know?
It varies. I'm going to say 40 to 60 in that range. That would be students, because you could have a family that has 3 students that
No, I
are.
understand, so 40 to 60.
Yeah, in that range is typically where we are.
40 to 60 students district-wide.
And
Smaller than I would expect it to be. That's-
Yeah, I mean, there are some districts that are well into the hundreds. that
do
are
we
even smaller than us,
perform a
but yeah.
census and how do we know someone new moves in? How do we know that they exist? And this actually doesn't only go to homeschooling, it really actually goes to how are we sure that we are fulfilling our obligation to provide a public education to residents? How do we perform a census to know who's in the district and where they're going or how they're being educated? Or we don't do that? So if someone moved in and didn't, we don't make an outreach that does an active census. Okay,
No.
some districts.
So Barry, what you're saying is there are 40 to 60 students that you are aware of that we are partnering with.
That have fulfilled the
Okay.
necessary paperwork through Council Rock.
But there could be many other students that are fulfilling it in some other fashion. I don't know enough about homeschooling.
There's things you have to do under the law, so if that's the case.
Right, but could they fulfill it outside of the law? Could they fulfill it within the confines of the law, but outside of council?
No, not if they're in this district.
So,
So
okay,
to answer the question Mike had asked me, how would we know? The community I grew up in used to hire census takers to go door to door each year to talk to people about how many students were in their building, how many people lived there, and how many were of school age. And they did it as a proactive activity.
Is that required by law? That's.
No.
And we have 66 homeschooled students this year.
I'm surprised.
All right.
Is there anybody dedicated to that, or is there a dedicated resource, central resource, or is that just individual schools handle them based on where they're at in their education?
No, it happens here. So homeschooling falls under my office, and we have a administrative assistant who handles the direct communication with parents and the paperwork. If that's what you're.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yep.
And the work get done.
Because we have guests who have experience with it. And Mark, you spoke to a homeschool not a coalition, something, organization. Are most, in your experience, are most people who are homeschooling in this community part of the same organization? Do they relate to the same organization, or do they every group is different? What I'm trying to figure out is there some way that is there a liaison between our district and the families of those 60 persons in a cohesive way? That's what I was trying to find out.
I think that is
shaking
Barry,
their
his
heads.
office, frankly. So, I mean, Barry is the point person. They're all different organizations, depending geographically, even, there's the Upper Bucks and that reach in even to Philadelphia. And people gravitate towards the groups that they're most comfortable with, right?
Yeah, maybe
So
different
the
affiliations.
HSLDA is an advocacy legal defense group. That's completely different. But, I don't think there's,
No, I
I don't
imagine
think there's
there's-
any need to do any more outreach. My opinion.
I just wondered.
There's a real dangerous area particularly since 2014, the legislature said, actually took away a lot of the authority that was legislated to the school district. So when you start talking about census taking and things like that, there's a real danger of the school district overreaching and doing things that they're not entitled under the law to do, which immediately gets us into litigation.
That's why
My question about census was, we actually have an obligation under law to educate all the children within the district. And if there's a child who isn't known to the district and they're not being educated because the parents failed to educate them, it still falls to the district as having failed. So we're at the loggerhead of two conflicting goods. And that was the question that I had. It's not that we would say, evaluate the program that was selected, but that we knew the child was enrolled, and somewhere that the parents would say, well, they're in parochial school, they're in day school. All right, I'm making this too long.
I think what you're saying is all coming from a good place.
No, it's not, I'm not trying to. 137 will go for approval. 137.1 is a discussion about extracurricular participation for home education students. Barry, you want to give us the introduction on it? Barry?
Sure. So what this does, this was an update in recent years to what was the original home education policy that mandated that school districts, now again, prior to this, some school districts did, others didn't, but mandated that school districts provide extracurricular opportunities that we provide to Council Rock students, to the home education students. So this policy PSBA provided to us. They've recommended that speaks specifically to how we would manage that.
Mr. Bialik, you had the outside organization look at it. Did they have some observations?
Just for the audience, PSBA is Pennsylvania School Boards Association. So that's, we contracted with them to go through the policies.
So I'll tell you, there's just two paragraphs. So the first one is under guidelines, and it referred to the third paragraph down, where it says, prior to trying out or joining an activity, a home education student shall submit required documentation and written verification of eligibility to the building principal or designee. The comment was not uncertain what is meant by required documentation and written verification of eligibility. So I'm assuming that
since it wasn't delineated what that documentation or verification is. Not
I
sure what
filled
that-
out 100 of them.
Yeah.
Every child I have for
Let's-
3
let's-
sports for every year. Oh my God.
Okay, or full normally scheduled academic program. But they said to the extent that these statements require something additional than the statute, it's unenforceable. So that's the comment.
I think that
It's the required document, I can like,
Good.
it's retired for us to participate in whatever it's called, I want to call it NCAA, but it's not the.
PIAA.
PIAA sports, you have these horrible, long documents that a doctor has to sign off on once a year, or you can't participate in like Suburban One. I don't know how that intersects with the law, Mark, you would know that more than me, but all I know is that it's not whether you're homeschooled or not. It's any student who
If you
wants to
wanna
participate
So
in
then
the
that
PIAA has to fill these, they ask, these questions are online, and all the students who participate in sports anyway. Now, the other clubs, I don't know that there's documentation, somebody else can
No,
speak
not
to that.
typically beyond
But,
PIAA.
but in the
yeah.
sports, you have, everybody has to do it.
So realistically, if.
It has nothing to do with being homeschooled.
I'm not
let
going
me
to
put
give
it
the
that
right
way.
phrasing, but the obligation is to provide all required documents and written verifications as required of all students participating in that activity. That's
And there's
really-
no academic, it's not like what grades did you get or that kind of thing.
But you,
So my question would be, is there an academic?
clarify
that there are different requirements by different organizations.
Yes.
However we state that,
Yes,
the PIAA is a 47-page document for any of us, regardless of how we choose to educate our children.
right.
I don't know.
Is that a verification of eligibility? Is that what that is?
Yes, it's like your birth date, it's what, they want to know what grade you played the sports in. I'm trying to remember. God, I feel this points out forever.
Plus your medical eligibility.
Yeah, medically is definitely, medical's definitely part of it.
So it's really just, that's my point was, it's, the requirement is to complete all the documentation required of all students.
Yeah, we're not asking
Participating.
anything special here.
Right. and
Right,
that's-
and it doesn't ask where you were schooled.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the,
It does ask
No,
where
I'm
you
just-
played.
I'm just reading the comments. I'm not sure. Well,
The way the act is written, it says a couple of things related to this. It says that the child can participate if they meet the eligibility criteria or their equivalent for participation in the activity that apply to students enrolled in the school district. So whatever we require of Council Rock students, we are requiring of homeschooled students in the co-curricular activities. It says then, as a final piece, a board of school directors may adopt a policy to implement the requirements of the subsection. Such policy shall only apply to participation in activities and shall not conflict with any provisions of this section. So that's,
So we'd have to think of a way to word that just refers to the requirements under the statute.
maybe we should write it just as they say it there. Meet the eligibility criteria, their equivalent for participation in the activity that applies to students enrolled in the school district.
Or just,
So is there an academic requirement within there, under the statute?
They're better. PIAA has an academic requirement,
So
so
is a homeschool student held to that same
yes, they would
standard
be.
of academic performance?
Yes. So in other words, if there was a concern that the homeschooled student was failing 2 or more subjects, as we hold our students accountable to. Now, it's a much more difficult process to monitor. We send an eligibility form around every Friday to all the teachers in the middle school and the high school that would have a list of all of our athletes. They have to check it to see if any of them are failing. It's much harder to do that. I will say to you that we've never in any of our co-curriculars had a concern expressed to us that they thought any of our homeschool participants were not academically eligible. If they did, I think we would have to ask that question of the homeschooling family. And if we were still suspect, I guess we'd have to ask our attorney how we would find it out.
But
Well, but the requirements, are we're assuming that you guys are following the requirements.
Yes,
There is
and we would say
academic-
to the homeschooling family that there's some expectations.
Therein lies the tie-in to the previous one when we spoke about what would regulations look like that the district might, or processes. And one of those processes that might be described is if your student is enrolled in a co-curricular, this is how we communicate to you. You need to inform us if your student is failing academically. This would be part of that working together, what our processes are. This is an example of that.
Can we just simply say, a home education student shall submit required documents to the building principal or designee and just take out and written verification of eligibility? Because if there are no required documents, we're done. Because if they're going, right?
Well, I think you have to refer to the statute. So I think anything that makes it feels that it's more far-reaching than the statute is problematic.
Yeah.
So it's, as Barry read, it's very clear in the statute, right? So if you just refer to that section in the statute, and since we're talking about it, there's also a
And it's one
discussion about a full normally scheduled academic program in the next paragraph. So that's kind of the same discussion.
And I just want to be clear, there's two different conversations talking about eligibility. I mean, there are components that Council Rock puts into place for students to participate in co-curriculars, but when we are following the PIAA as a member of that, we have no option. So those are, all of our participants have to be a part of. So if we couldn't allow a homeschooled student who didn't meet eligibility requirements to participate, because all of that entire program would be forfeit all of its games in which that student participated. So there's really two different components to the conversation.
Barry, read up until the point, I don't care about the point where it says the district can make rules.
The other piece of it.
Yeah.
Meets the eligibility criteria or their equivalent for participation in the activity that apply to students enrolled in the school district. That seems like.
And then quote the statute.
That is the statute.
I mean, what's your
Reference.
reference your statute and.
So that says exactly that the homeschool student has to meet the same eligibility requirements as any student enrolled in this.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I said.
So that's what the statute says.
Can we, there's a,
Yeah,
one
I'm
in
sorry,
there, go with the question.
Very.
I'm sorry, my name is Karen. And so as a homeschool parent, I'm not necessarily required to keep a grade book or to keep track of my child's grades weekly. So is it sufficient for the district for me to write and sign a letter saying, yes, my child is meeting, that he is or she is performing adequately in his classes? Because by law, I don't have to sign him or her grades weekly or monthly or even in a report card necessarily.
Yeah, and that's what I indicated. It's a very difficult piece for people who are participating. Let's just use interscholastic athletics as an example. So if a student was participating on the baseball team and we seek grades on our students, we don't seek a grade for our homeschooled students.
Okay, thank you.
So the starting assumption is
Or equivalent.
right. And yeah, unless we felt that there was something that, and I don't know how we would know. And I guess that's, the difficult part that, it's a harder rule to enforce eligibility from that aspect academically for a homeschool student than for a Council Rock
Do
student.
the leagues permit you to take do the
That's exactly what the statute says.
do the leagues permit you to take the default assumption for a homeschooled student that unless we are notified, we believe that unless we are notified they are failing, that they are passing? Because you go through the paperwork of getting that note, and I guess that was a question kind of embedded in what she had said before. You take the process, an affirmative action within the district to say, if you mark this paper if they're failing, and absent that, we have the paper back as record. And her question seemed to say, if I understand, do I need to document, I'm putting words in your mouth, let me know, does she need to document on a weekly basis to the district that her child is not failing? So our default premises, okay, but our default premises
That they are
they're
eligible.
passing. Okay, they are
As it
passing.
is for Council Rock students, the default is you're eligible until 2 teachers of full year courses.
That's,
say
I didn't
no.
mean to interpret, but I just want to make sure.
But Barry, the bottom line is our practices. We must adhere to, everybody must adhere to PIAA guidelines.
Mhm.
And the rest of it
It's
is what it
commentary.
is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes,
really,
yeah, the PIA
that's,
dictates what the rules are.
we make
not
a
us.
presumption, we assume everybody's operating as a measure of good faith. We put the PIAA
Come back.
paperwork is not governed by Council Rock. We don't, that's what we subscribe to, and that's what you must subscribe to, that's what we must subscribe to.
Correct.
Beyond that.
I understand that. I'm saying, like, I might not be able to give you a weekly grade and.
It doesn't
Vary
answer
with
that.
it.
It doesn't ask for that.
Yeah, we're
I
not.
believe the district is in full partnership, in my Understand.
To put it another way, we don't technically require our teachers to update their grades on a weekly basis. We ask for a grade in terms of sending that around, but it may be that we went from one week to another week. Depending on how the school calendar breaks, there may have only been 2 or 3 days of school. And depending on what the subject is, you may have only seen the students 1 or 2 days for that class. So you might not have any grades from one Friday to the previous Friday. So it's the same grade as it was the previous week.
You're right.
So whatever the most recent grade was, it just carries forward.
As a teacher, you kind of have an idea of how they're doing anyways, just the same way with the mom. I was actually a public school teacher before I homeschooled my children.
Same concept.
Mark, we ran through the observations or was more? And then we're going to dismiss it.
There's more, Jerry. So the next paragraph, as I said, it refers to, I'm sorry, I was trying to find my space here.
To be considered in the thing.
1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph down reads, is that what you were just saying? To be considered in attendance in accordance with board policy, the home education student must participate in a full, normally scheduled academic program in accordance with the planned home education program and submit documentation. The comments were this, they quoted the full, normally scheduled academic program, and that falls under and not sure what is meant by that, but to the extent of these statements requiring something additional than the statute is unenforceable. So I don't know if we just discussed that. It kind of feels like the same thing to me.
Again, in practice, when the home education program is approved by us,
That's a full
That's what
academic
it is.
program.
right, it's done. I mean, if it was submitted and didn't, it would be discussed long before the program ever started. So,
Yeah,
So if I removed full normally scheduled academic out of there, it would just say must participate in a program in accordance with the planned home education program and submitted documentation. And that pretty much sums it up.
I think if you put a period after program,
No, participate in a program.
in a program in accordance, read what you said again. Take out and submitted documentation.
So to be considered in attendance in accordance with board policy, the home education student must participate in a full, normally scheduled academic program. Stop.
No.
Is that
Yeah,
what
what
you're
he's
saying?
looking, what, I think what we want to encompass here is they must be participating in the program that they had documented in the district.
Correct.
the approved program, approval maybe.
So they
a bad
documented
term, but I
to
think that's
the district that there's a program they're going to be participating in. We said, do we actually approve it? Or
I'm
we
gonna
just,
see what the wording is.
what's the
to it.
word for what we
So
do with
that's all
that?
I'll
We just
find out.
acknowledge it or accept?
Accept it.
So they must be participating in the
Acknowledge your,
program. but-
acknowledge receipt of your plan to provide a home schooling for your child is how we.
So they must be participating in the planned program, in the program that they had notified the school of.
That complies with the requirements of the act.
Right, home education program in accordance with the plan. How much?
I think, I can help you out here. I would have participate in an academic program in accordance with blah, blah, blah. Because we did make a plan together. There's documentation on file that you have, which is in accordance with the law. Now, this whole full, normally scheduled, that's superfluous.
And again, I think if you just put a period after program and don't require additional documentation.
Right, I see where you're going.
That makes it much
Right.
easier.
The last 3 words of that
Because you've already done the
paragraph are done.
documentation you need to give to the district.
How's that work?
You guys want to read?
A student must participate in an academic program in accordance with the planned home education program.
I think that's what
Yeah, yes, it's not too many programs, but that's okay. We can,
Take what you.
I might have a little change at the meeting, but that's, is that okay?
Yeah, it's not really substantive, so I mean, yeah.
Can you say what
it's-
it- would it be okay?
No. All right, moving on,
But
right?
he was being respectful.
The next paragraph reads, delegation of responsibility under this, which is on the second page. You can read the actual proposed policy, but the comment says, the paragraph immediately prior to delegation of responsibility
may be problematic because eligibility cannot be limited to students who participate in a class, but doing so would categorically discriminate against the homeschoolers. That being said, I understand some classes may require some participation at the school, so the legality of this would have to be discussed on a case-by-case basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the classic here, and I'll look at our music teacher,
Yeah,
is band.
yeah.
It's been, I've argued this for years, that we have band as a class to do the co-curricular. That would be the penultimate, that would be the case that points to most frequently. Do we have any other academic requirement for a co-curricular activity other than band?
No, music, yeah, music in general.
Sorry,
Yeah, I
it's
would
all
say
your
music.
fault.
Band and orchestra are very different.
Well, so Abby's kids are active in this, so what do you think about that?
He does go in for a class that other kids receive credit for.
We've tried, when we can, work with the music department to try to accommodate that balance between a student not necessarily being a member of the class or being a part of a particular class and still being able to participate in the program. And we've left it up to our music folks, and maybe you're citing the best example, that they try to make it work.
They do, they're fabulous.
Yeah.
We've dealt with a lot of music stuff and
Yeah,
they're
that's the
really.
best I can say, is we just say, if you can make it work, make it work.
Well, and that's kind of it. I don't know much about homeschooling, so I will profess my ignorance of it, which is I'm trying to, if the objective is not to be involved in the school, then being in co-curricular would be antithesis of that anyhow. So that they're involved in the school, but not for an academic setting. You know, I'm not sure how the band and the orchestra work from that perspective. How they could, forgive me, I know they are an academic setting, but they're to achieve a slightly different purpose.
The relationship in Council Rock, between that curricular and co-curricular program is somewhat unique. So it does make that a more difficult component to balance, but I think we've tried to make it work as best we can.
Well, instead of saying home education students will not be eligible to participate, because we have an example where they are eligible to participate, we made it work. We'd say accommodations will be worked towards to achieve satisfaction for both parties or something.
Or maybe.
I mean, yeah, like we don't, right here it says you're out, but instead we have a homeschool student who is actually taking the class and participating.
Well,
So I think we want to be a little more.
But can I ask if, in that sentence, I don't know what the purpose of the phrase "for credit" bears in that.
That's where I think our work, we don't
And that-
issue a credit
Right.
for that
So,
Oh.
in
Oh,
part,
I see what you were trying to say.
that
I understand.
if a class held during the school day by the school district is required for participation,
In the
to
activity,
take.
homeschool students, we will work to try to achieve an accommodation. We just take the word for
Well,
credit
well,
out.
why don't
We're
we
not going to
say-
give credit.
Well, they will be, well, let's go to at it from the other side of the story, which says that they will be invited to participate in the class on a non-credit basis. Because that's what's happening in practice.
Right.
That's what's happening
Is
in
there-
practice.
Is there ever an
Right,
opportunity?
home education students shall not be eligible to participate in such activities unless they are participating in, the same way our students are.
Well, it's the
And-
credit that's the issue.
You can't,
Oh, I see.
yeah, you can't, and you also, you can't discriminate against the homeschooling class.
Right, we're not allowing them
No,
to
we're
attend
not.
a class so they
I
can
get
do the
that, but-
activity.
You can't perform the field show at the football game if you're not in class when they're
I get
practicing.
it, I get it.
So, but I'm saying, so if we have language that says they are eligible if they're doing that, as opposed to.
They're eligible to
positive and not
participate.
negative.
They're eligible to participate, but they will not receive credit, class credit. That class credit is what we can't do, right? You're shaking your head,
Could you just take the not out, shall be eligible to participate in such activities?
but we want to take the for credit out,
And
so
then
we're not going to
you
issue
could
a class
say
credit.
without receiving
Class
academic
credit.
credit
Yeah,
or something
I love
like that.
Right, so we'll make it a positive statement. Why don't we make it a positive statement that they will be eligible, they are eligible to participate in the activity
They're not gonna
if they
receive
take the
class
class on a non-credit basis, and that's really what it is.
They're auditing.
You're on it, that's fine.
That's cool.
You might as well, if you're gonna take shot, you gotta take not out of there, you might as well just eliminate the whole paragraph, frankly, because it's,
Well, I'm trying to make it,
Well, we're
I-
trying to say that they have to, if they're they're gonna participate in the activity, they get to take the class. We're trying to say they're
It is
allowed.
nice to
audit.
have in there, because my thought is looking at this 5 years from now, somebody's looking at this saying, okay, well, what's the policy? Like, if I were a new homeschooling parent in the district, and I read this, I would say, oh my gosh, my son can't go in for any of this orchestra stuff.
Right.
So we're trying to write it.
That's why I came tonight, because I didn't think that was very useful.
So we're
I
trying to
think we
make,
said you can audit the class.
so
You just won't get class credit for it.
I think, for me, at this point, you understand the intent that we want to get to,
Yeah.
which is
I don't even think we want to talk about auditing the class, because that sounds like you
just let them
don't, I think, right.
take the class on a
right.
non-credit
If it's
basis.
required to participate in the co-curricular activity, and again,
We'll
we're
open the
talking only
class
about music, we would permit the student to participate in the class.
Yeah, and then just let it go.
Yeah.
Okay,
That
you
works?
guys will take care of that.
Yeah, I think
Perfect.
that's fine, as long as it doesn't have the word not.
No, because we're already doing it.
Oh,
We're
well, that
actually
was-
not.
I wanted to call that to your attention, just in case no one in this room.
Strike the knot.
Rather than tell them
Right.
the school day.
Other observations?
No, I love that,
Oh,
and
the class.
my children are not there yet, like, as to doing that, but I was in band choir, I love that, perfect, amazing.
Okay, listen, I don't mean to throw
Yeah.
flyness on you, but is anyone else reading
You
this?
throw a wrench.
Is anyone else reading this that where the paragraph actually reads, if the homeschool student does not participate in the in-school class, then they can't participate in the activity outside of the class. That is the purpose of that paragraph, right?
That's true, they
Correct.
have,
Okay.
they have to be together.
So please explain to me how what we just did corrects that, because now I'm reading it to say, the student shall be eligible to participate if he or she does not participate in that class.
No, I think it says you don't get credit for the class, you have to go to the class.
Student credit.
Well, you can put students shall be eligible to participate if they attend the class.
See, because this reads in such activities, those activities would be the activities outside of the class.
So we should just say that, would be eligible to participate if they attend the class on a non-credit basis.
Yes.
Well, and can I just say something that as a homeschool parent, you are kind of getting a credit anyway, like you can get credit for taking a class like that. So I don't even know.
But
if
not
it's
credit
right.
from us.
I know it's
Right.
right, Counselor Rock, but like
Yeah,
they
you can
can
do whatever
get
you want.
credit, you can get phys ed credit for going to Planet Fitness.
Yeah, we wouldn't issue the credit, but you could mark it as credit.
It's our
within
policy,
your
meaning
program.
our credit.
Right, I know,
Yeah.
I know it's understood, but it's not.
And I
Well,
think-
wait a minute.
Trying to take away credit.
Well, okay, I'm going to do it again, though. So if we have a homeschool student in ninth grade that takes this orchestra class or band class, and then in 10th grade enrolls in school, does he or she not get credit for that class that they took?
Well, no,
Would they not?
and it doesn't matter, because really what matters is what is provided by the family about what the ninth grade home education program was. And we then we don't issue credit, but we recognize that they would be equal to credits
Okay.
if they were a ninth grade student.
And
they
would you
plan for
not
a
be
10th
able to
grade year.
issue credit? I mean, as a parent of a homeschool child, aren't you the ones,
That'd be good.
and I don't know enough about it.
Should be.
So I'm coming from a completely uneducated, you
Not for
document,
Counselor Rock's
you
but for
document the
evaluator.
credit. So
Well, it's not
Counselor
technically
Rock is
credit, I
saying,
guess, is the difference. That's,
Right.
our courses are attached to credit, their courses are attached to courses. So when they bring in a title of a course for us, we then recognize that that would have been equal to an English credit
right,
as a ninth grade
so,
student.
but I'm saying, these families would be
Yes.
saying, we have completed X, Y, and Z as part of our requirements,
Including.
and Council Rock would back that up, and if asked,
Correct.
and provide whatever, so it's.
Truthfully.
Yeah, we do it all the
It's all
time. When
credit.
somebody registers after being a homeschooler, we do it all the time.
Isn't it possible as well?
It's not Council Rock credit, you have a credit, you have to
Just
provide
remember
your
that
credit.
Isn't
We
it
have
possible
to-
as well that a homeschool parent could work through their program and say, and in our homeschool program, the child is taking band. And it's the band, and that's done. I mean, that's your choice. I mean, you just lay out the program, and that's one of the things. I'm asking if it could happen. I imagine
I would just say
Could or you could not.
co-curricular activities instead of saying take place outside of class. In other words, for
There's a
participation
concern that
in,
if the homeschool
co-curricular
kid doesn't
activities.
go to the class,
yes.
is there language in that last paragraph that says that if the let's say the kid is like playing baseball and there's some kind of meeting during the day and he doesn't go to that,
It's not a class, that's a meeting.
right? Okay. I just
This
wasn't
is
sure
specifically
if
about
that's
classes.
what they were getting
I
at.
think anything's modern to that.
Yeah, I can't think of any program that this speaks to outside of music.
Oh, okay.
And co-curricular.
Well, there was,
District number 2.
You Be the Chemist,
And co-curricular activities.
where, it didn't meet during, it wasn't during the day though.
It wasn't a class,
And
right?
it's not a
It
class.
wasn't class.
Not a class.
Co-
And I think it's important from my perspective that the classes, even though they're not credit, maybe.
Really?
Play
See?
and the,
RRICULAR.
But elementary, the play was all after school.
No,
Another class.
Oh, at my school it was.
there's, my son did go in sixth grade to participate in a play where, and there was a chorus and they required, they required him to go.
No,
to
we did it all
music
after
class.
school.
Yeah,
100% of the
that
play was
goal
after
to
school.
participate, he had to go to music class, so he just went to music class.
That's the practice, so to speak. I mean,
Yeah.
as a sport, you can't play a game if you don't come to the practices. I guess that's really.
Yeah, she wanted him to come to
Okay.
the chorus rehearsals so that he could.
The intent of all of this is to say you can do it if you want to
Yeah.
come to the stuff you need to do. So
Yeah.
I think in reality, but to your point, I don't want someone to read it who's not even ever talked to us and think, oh, I'm just out, I can't do this.
In
Yeah,
practice,
I-
we do it. This is intended to memorialize
Right.
everything.
I think we've got what we needed to get on this.
I'll just tell, because we changed it. So we just removed outside of that class and made it for participation in co-curricular activities. And then we refer to the required class, just to make it.
Okay.
a little
And I really have to say, I think that the aspect that there are in some of these things, because it's a group activity, that if you didn't participate in that group activity, or that class, it actually has an impact. It could have a safety impact. It certainly will have a performance impact on the output. And I think it's reasonable to expect that level of cooperate, of integration of the two programs for that purpose, for safety and to assure the level of performance of the activity. Other observations on that one?
That's all I have from the HSLDA, but I think Abby has some.
I did want to just call your attention, a lot of these, all of the bullet points, there's no bullets there, but all of these paragraphs on page 1, between the word guidelines, there are, well, there are 8, but then, so a lot of this is not represented in the statute itself. Some of it is, but the one that I was the most concerned about is the second paragraph under guidelines. It says a home education student may participate in extracurricular activities in interscholastic athletic programs only at the school building the student would be assigned to if he or she was enrolled in the school district.
In part, let me explain why that would be. Because it would be possible then, a student in the school, let's say the high school level, the student in the high school level is assigned to the building they go. And maybe the other team has a better football, the other school has a better football team.
Right, yes, you don't want them hopping all over.
Exactly, and so what I would wind up getting into a situation then where is I have kids shopping, and
And
that would be
it's
problematic.
fact, too,
We don't let the regular-
School play is better than school, so I'm.
Exactly,
No, I
and-
understand, but I just.
We don't let regular students do that.
We don't
So
let
it's
anybody do that.
I'm just saying it's no worse than, believe me, we've had that issue in sports. We
So-
don't allow them.
I
to
almost
do
look at it as when the baseball player can bat or pitch left or right, and he can switch at will, and we can't allow
that.
that.
So if we said the same as we require.
I'm just
active
wondering, is
conservation-
somebody gonna read this and think, for instance, my kids through their, extracurriculars, activities have been in almost, at least 50% of the schools in the district for music and things like that. They have traveling concerts,
Oh, it doesn't mean you
all
can't
sorts of different stuff.
go to the stuff, you're just not part
I
of
just,
the
the way
team
it's
from.
worded is kind of,
Could I make a
I just wanna make
suggestion?
sure it couldn't be interpreted
Yeah.
that way.
And please understand, I'm not trying to stop or halt or hinder any conversation. Could, before we, if we're gonna go through this policy, for example, Mike, you know he better serve to sit with our administration and go through that and have an actual conversation with regard to concerns that you have, or share that in some fashion to explain your position, because to start, if we're gonna start
That's
to.
actually the only other thing that I noticed.
And again, I
That's
want to
the
be
end.
there, I'm not trying to stop it. If there needs to be greater or different or better communication between our homeschool families and our administration,
No way, they do a great job. I don't have anything negative to say whatsoever.
I will tell
There's
you,
enough communication to keep it working, but there's not too much communication.
I'll tell you this, which this conversation's been enlightening for me, so I appreciate that you came to talk about it. It's not something we've talked about at great length, but it also highlights something, and I look at Dr. Fraser and Dr. Elliott around this and say, district. This means that your homeschooled children may suddenly be at a different place because your neighbor's children may change the school they go to.
Yeah.
So your child who may have participated at North before, well, that would be a silly one, but at Richboro Middle School, certainly that building won't be there in a few weeks.
Right.
They'll be going someplace else. They're going to go for their co-curricular activities with their neighbors, even though their life will not have changed. All right, it's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it before this meeting.
And Abby really brought up a good point. It's not about the administration we're dealing with today. It's about the administration we may be dealing with next year, right? So,
Yeah, that was my concern, is that that line could have been
so it
misinterpreted.
could be,
here's
it
what
could
I
be
think
too
of that.
restrictive.
In that idea, if a home education student may participate in extracurricular activities and interscholastic athletic program as a member of a team or member of a group from the building in which the group. So you might go to other schools, but you are going as a member of Maureen Welsh's
Right.
drama club.
Yeah.
So you might perform at Richboro Middle School. I never read it, I
I never
understood
did
what,
either. I mean-
once you said that, I was like, oh, no, it doesn't mean you can't go to another building. It just means you're gonna be part of a group based out of your home building.
And I gotta be honest with you, that'd be a violation of statute. You couldn't say you're a member of the softball team at North, but you can't go play over at South.
Right, well, that was
Because
getting
all
my
the rest of the
next
team
point.
goes to South, so you can't do that.
Yeah,
So
so,
I
so
think
maybe
the
the,
statute.
maybe the
in terms of
clarity
that-
can just be to put as a member of the team from that home school or something like that.
Just leave it alone. Be discriminatory. Other people are a member of us, you can't do it.
Because we're one district.
Yeah.
We are one district.
I don't, and she misread them and I read it now.
We said it.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
You think it's
I
dramatic?
think
Okay,
it,
okay, I don't,
my take on this is, are we following state law and are we treating these children exactly the same? And we are. Done. I mean, Jerry stepped out. He asked me to just take a poll. Are we good for this as a first read? Okay. I guess to
Are
keep,
we through with this topic?
we are through with that
We
topic.
want to make certain there's no more additional public comment.
That's a good call, and he's back now. Any other public comments
I think she does have a question.
about the policy?
Well, it's about extracurricular activities. It is only inclusive of extracurricular and sports, music, whatever. But music is a subject. Art, what about art?
Art is not a extracurricular activity.
they have clubs.
Is music?
Music is, and that's where we kind of figured out that line where there's a connection between a class and the co-curricular. We permitted that.
That's the struggle on this. Most children can't participate in the co-curricular activities without any, just by registering and advising, and they can be part of it included. Our conundrum here, which took the largest part of the conversation, was that requirement that you take a class to do it. That was where we got into the big mix. If your child, as was pointed out, if there, I guess if there was, that's an interesting question. If there were an art show.
How about if there's an art club? Let's use that as an
Art
example.
That's what I was thinking.
Because art
club,
show is
yes.
actually, an art show is actually the product of class.
Of the class.
So
But
if
an
you
art
wanted to
club-
show,
Music is the only one.
yes.
Where there's a connection between a course that you must be in during the school day and the co-curricular activity.
Now, is orchestra in that?
Music.
Yes.
Yes, not all music, but most music. Pardon me?
Because they do concerts? Or?
No.
Well, because
Because to be a member of a certain orchestra group, you must also take the class during the school day. So in this particular case, we're saying if a homeschooled family has a child that wants to do that, we will permit them to go into that class during the school day. So they're going to have to do both. They're going to have to be available to
Right. I mean,
participate
I
during
get
the
that.
period
I
that
just
runs,
didn't
right?
know-
My example, Golden Wings at South or Sock and Buskin at North, they're the theater companies.
Right.
There's no obligation to be in a class, any class. The children who are in that course are in that, they can be any class they want in school. That's totally outside of the time for that. So that's no requirement for a class. There's no grade required or anything.
What about like a science fair display? I know there are 1 or 2 evenings. There,
No class.
That's not a class.
That's not a club either.
It's not a club either.
It's, there are clubs, but
Not.
So science fairs are connected to the science class, because I ran science fairs in Pennsylvania, so, but they are attached in elementary school, we're attached to the class.
If they're
Not in my
attached,
experience.
right? Most of them are
I
not.
don't
Most
know.
of them are outside of in other words, a teacher doesn't sit with the class and say, we're going to do projects for the science fair now.
But
They meet
last-
students after
People,
school.
my experience was it was PTO of that class.
Yeah, it was a PTO event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only word, and I just come to this one question here, which is we use the word participate in extracurricular activities. I just ask because it becomes a problem. I thought I heard this hint of a word before, which was the kid wants to go to a play, to watch a play, certainly they can go. So is that participating? If they want to go and be in the stands for a football game, is that participating? But
That's open to the public. Those are public
Okay.
zones.
I just want to make sure that's. So where are we on this? We are with the changes Matt has documented so far. Are there any other changes that the administration needs to look into outside of this? So this will go for approval. This will go for approval at the next meeting.
Public comment on this.
At this, okay. Yeah, well, it was kind of integrated. All right. We have 25 minutes remaining. We try and time box this to 2 hours, if that's all right with everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What are we doing? The same methodology.
You know what, how about if I talk out here so you can keep going?
All right,
Are
we're
you
gonna
gonna-
move on to Dr. Elliott's portion of the program tonight. Dr. Elliott, we're looking now at 116 tutoring.
Yes. So the intent of this policy is to provide some guidelines for different opportunities when students may either need or be looking for tutoring for certain reasons. So based on some feedback, as you mentioned earlier, Dr. Foster sent, my only recommendations for changing, and I have some things to add as opposed to what was in the packet that received pretty much anywhere where it designates the superintendent as the person to do something, want to add to that language superintendent or designee.
And I guess we had rather, some more?
Nope, that's it for this one.
We had, go ahead,
I just had a question.
please.
Just, and it relates more to practice, because I know there were very often parents asking questions about how to find out about available tutors. And is there any need in the policy to list anything about what is, like, parents shouldn't necessarily be talking to their own teacher and asking for tutors or like, as they try to route it through the counselor or something, so does there have to be any language about how a parent?
Well, it says in the second paragraph of the guidelines, I'm not sure if this speaks to what you're asking, is in cases where extra help is desirable and the parents or guardians request such from assistance, the building principal or designee may recommend the parent, guardians.
It's saying that they
This
may recommend that they
services,
need
yes, so, let me just look at,
I don't know if it's needed, I'm just asking you just in my own experience, or even if you see it on social media, I need a geometry tutor, so there's like a lot of chatter, and this probably isn't law or anything, but I just don't know if there's some language in the policy that needs to sort of direct. You can think about it, I don't know if it's needed or not, I just wanted to talk about what actually happens. You know what I mean?
I'd love to be able to go to one of my kids' teachers and say, do you recommend it to?
But I think there's some inconsistency about, no, not recommend a tutor, recommend a specific tutor.
That's what she said.
I'm talking.
No, I want to be able to go to my kid's teacher and say, can you recommend the best tutor for my child?
Because I have heard inconsistencies that some teachers have said they're not allowed to do that, so I don't know, I mean, so it's a
There-
practice issue, I don't know if it's policy driven or not, I'm just.
There's a,
That I understand.
Yeah, to Kyle's point, I read this policy with interest today, with a little concern that we were in any way limiting parents' freedom to do that. And I would agree with Kyle that I didn't see anything in here that would do that, and I would be opposed to anything in our policy that would in any way restrict parents' ability to seek a tutor on their own.
for me, looking at this today, and this is where Susan and I had a long discussion about this. There are two aspects to tutoring. One is if your child needs help and is in a class that is provided by the district and you want additional support for your child. Much of this is really geared towards around if your child is going, and we use the example just because, and it may be the wrong example, we use the example of if you want your child to take Mandarin and you want to have your child take that through a separate program and you want to find a private tutor and have them take that for credit, both of those things are sucked into this as a melange. And for me, looking at the first aspect of it, I want help for my student who's struggling in his physics class. I come to be worried if we're going to provide lists of tutors or approved tutors or accepted tutors, because suddenly it comes with an imprimatur of the district, and imagine, if you will, God forbid, that tutor who is on the district's list, and we said, yeah, they meet all of our qualifications, does something inappropriate to the student. And the person then looks and says, I got the name from you. You're part of the party, you're part and party of you recommended them. This is the same thing in business when you recommend someone for a job, which is why companies don't do that anymore. So I have that concern that we might be in the business of recommending or having a list of recommended or approved. I would like to get out of that business because it could suck us into something. The other aspect of this is a wholly different matter, if I understood our conversation today, which really go to that. I want my child to learn engineering, and I have an engineering teacher for my child. And that course of he's going to take engineering, that's where that tutorial portion does come in, that the district has some obligation to make sure the person is certified to teach it. I'm concerned, maybe I differ.
But I mean, in practice though, I do believe that the counseling officers of the high schools maintain lists of tutors. That is a group that people seeking tutors, one of the groups that people seeking tutors.
And you're saying you don't want that?
I'm saying I'm concerned that it puts us, particularly if it's an approved list that's detailed out, it's a little different than what you go, as Kyle had said.
No, I did this.
Who's a good physics teacher?
I
Who's a
did
good
this.
physics teacher? And someone says, you should talk to so-and-so.
I did this for my child.
But that's
It was-
not our district approved list.
Was it
That's,
element?
you should talk to so-and-so, which is a different discussion.
It
I'm
is.
sorry, Lenny.
That's right.
And
I did
We have
it.
policy, or we have practice?
I went to the principal said, we in no way recommend or endorse. This is a list of current Council Rock teachers who do tutoring outside of the school district. We're not recommend, and the thing said right on it, we're not recommending, we're simply, these are teachers who know the curriculum that we teach here and who do tutoring on the outside. And then I went through that list myself. But and again, it was 1995, so certainly the world's changed or whatever it was. It was probably past 95, 98. But at any rate, I'm just saying, like, the list I got, I was clear, Council Rock wasn't recommending, but they were teachers because the teachers knew the curriculum. So you're concerned, we're already scanned, there are teachers, we're already liable for them. And I had to call them and see what they did. Now, what they get in the high school, I don't know. But I'm just telling you what happened in elementary school.
And I will tell you this, which is, and Mike asked me something to the side, and this has been a pain for me for a long time, which is, that we offer that list, it's kind of a wink wink thing, which is, it's like, well, we don't recommend them, but this is the list. I have a problem at some point where the district is facilitating our staff finding an opportunity to earn additional funds with students whose deficit in learning may not be wholly attributable to the student's deficit, but maybe because of an incompatibility or a deficit in a teaching staff member. I have that problem.
Can
That's
I
a
offer an
huge problem.
alternate opinion?
Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying, and I don't entirely disagree, but I love, like, when the chemistry teacher called and my 22-year-old, now 22-year-old, was about to fail chemistry, and I needed help, I was freaking thrilled for the help that they gave me, and thrilled that I had help that came through
100%.
somebody who knew and understood our curriculum.
100%.
I didn't feel like it was, this person needs your $60 an hour. I was thrilled that the teacher that I trusted understood their curriculum, understood they couldn't do it in clinic, saved my freaking life.
I had at least one tutor
I'm
before I
innocent.
got the recommendation that didn't work out. And by the way, the parents that I know that feel that their child isn't getting what they need because maybe there's some conflict in the classroom that's preventing, they're in the principal's office screaming about that. They're not saying, I'm gonna shell out $60 a week, every week for 6 years. That's, I need somebody in the district who knows the district who can help my kid, because my kid, for whatever reason in that topic, needs a little help they're not getting in the classroom.
And someone
I
owes
am
me,
totally
and someone
in
owes
favor.
me 36 times 60, because I had.
Well, you had a bad experience,
I
but
had
I'm
a-
just saying I had
so-
a great one.
So please, and then I'll let more, my conundrum here is, there is the practice that we love, and there are the things we do to be responsible and fiduciary responsibility for the district in terms of protecting the district. Mark, I'm sorry.
So did somebody suggest that we add in the policy here that the district maintain a list of recommended tutors? Is that how this discussion started? I'm just curious.
I don't want the district to
No.
maintain a list.
I don't want a
I don't want
policy around
teachers
that.
to feel like they can't recommend something.
No, I just, I was trying to, I was out of the room, so I was just trying to catch up.
I'm just saying that there are things that go on, and I don't know how well it jives. The practice of what's happening in our high schools, just to make sure that it's matching the
Right.
language.
So
That's all I'm saying.
That's okay, go ahead, Mark.
Can I, so I'm confused by it because we continue to stray off policy and practice, and maybe it's just in my mind. But is there anything in policy that affects practice, or restricts a certain practice, like maintaining a list, if it's not forbidden in policy or allowed in policy? I'm just curious. Does that make sense what I just said? So
Sorry, ask
if
that
it's
again.
not in the policy,
Correct.
can the district keep a list, or can a teacher say, okay, here are 4 different tutors that I would recommend to a student, and this tutor number 2 would fit
Yes.
better for
And we-
Kyle's son? But since it's not in the policy, is that allowed?
Yes, we have an administrative regulation linked to this policy that says that the district will maintain a list of available instructional tutors.
Okay.
So we do have that written in a regulation, but it's not specified in the policy that we have to maintain that, or that the superintendent or his designee.
And that's where I was
But in
questioning
terms
whether.
of practice, Wendy's the consummate rule follower. She follows the policy. So she goes to the building principal or the curriculum coordinator. I go right to my kid's teacher and I'm like, help, I need help, where am I going? I'm only concerned that I don't want to limit my ability to talk to any teacher or principal or administrator in that building to say, and then it's up to me.
Well, just the point then, it's not really policy, it's administrative regs that we're at, right?
Right?
I raised it
Right.
only to say that tutoring is a huge issue in the high schools, huge. And I just want to make sure that there's nothing that is currently happening that we pass this, somebody's gonna read it and say, oh, we're in violation. So I just want to make sure that the language
So
All
the
is.
regulation, I'll read the regulation to you. It says, for the convenience of our parents, the Council Rock School District will maintain a list of available instructional tutors. The list will be maintained by the supervisor of pupil services in consultation with the guidance departments at each middle school and high school and guidance counselors at the elementary level. That list will be available to interested parents and students through their assigned guidance counselor.
And to which policy is that administrative reg type?
116.
Fine. The characterization of 116 is wholly different in what we're looking at here from the 116 we had. The 116 we had was specifically around supportive tutoring. The 116 we're looking at now is tied to replacement educational through a private tutoring organization. They're wholly divergent in what their intent and purpose is.
Well, not quite, because the old reg, it says in the authority section, when the student's learning interests and needs are sufficient to warrant help beyond ordinary classroom instruction. That doesn't necessarily mean the student needs tutoring because they're not being successful. I mean, saying it's learning interests or needs could imply, as you talked about, I want to take Mandarin, and we don't provide that instruction, that language in our world language program. So the student is looking for that opportunity to take Mandarin. So
following that through,
yes,
I would disagree with you because of in the authority under the third line, the end of that line says this determination will be made through the joint consultation of the classroom teacher. There's no classroom teacher for Mandarin. So that would not apply in this case. So this is, in my opinion, wholly in the old one, wholly supportive. So I just want to differentiate that we may need to renumber these. And I think the one we're looking at here, the new tutorial is really tutoring. It's going to be around, I would be more comfortable. This was structured around tutoring for instruction, it's a long title, tutoring for instruction not otherwise provided, or for topics not otherwise provided. It's a
Like
different,
Mandarin? Is that-
yeah, exactly, that it's for courses not offered. It's.
But I want to make sure we're clear too, the paragraph that speaks to excusal from school.
I have real heartburn with that.
Well, that's tied directly to our attendance policy. So a parent can't just say, I want to take my child out of school because I want them to participate in this program.
Right.
So that's why those things are written, that it speaks to, in a field not offered in the district, if such excusal does not interfere with the student's regular program of studies, they must provide the tutor. So I can't just take my child out and say, I want to go get Mandarin because Council Rock doesn't offer it.
Right.
Because that would interfere with the program because they're leaving the building. So that's why it's written as such and is spoken to also in our attendance policy.
I'm glad if we change this thing from tutoring to renaming it to something where it's going to be around adding a course that isn't offered by the school at the expense of the parent, which is what this is about by and large. This one doesn't talk to supplemental, this talks to, in essence, replacement education. And yes, your excusal from school is absolutely appropriate in that context. The old tutoring thing was talking about supplemental education.
Well, right above it, that is the supplemental, right? In cases where extra help is desirable and the parent's guardians request such assistance, the building principal may recommend to the parents.
Pull that section out and put it back into a rewrite of what we have now as 116.
116, 116.1.
Something like that, because they're different topics.
Yeah, because I don't want, we can't pull student A out to get remedial math help out of their, I don't know, reading class. The excusal from school, the parent can't. The excusal from school really gives me heartburn if it's not if it's not additional.
That's a very unique circumstance that would be approved.
I hear you, but that's why I want to make it. So if we can make that, if you can come up with a creative second title for that and make that.
Sorry.
I would make that 116.1, and then if we're going to add that paragraph that Barry's suggesting, you can integrate that into our existing 116.
So do we want to do it a 116 and 116.1, or do we want to just add a heading in front of that paragraph that Barry just pointed out in cases where extra help is desirable, and give it a title that speaks to it as being tutoring for academic support? I don't know if that's the right
My
title.
point was that I would take it as separate, because you get down this whole rabbit trail here where you're talking about private tutoring, and that and they needs to comply with state law and has to be properly qualified, that only makes sense in replacement tutoring. It doesn't make sense in private tutoring. You can private tutor in what we would call our 116. You could have a non-qualified, you could have a high school senior tutor you in math if you want to do it privately in the policy we have now. As compared to this policy, that private tutoring only makes sense as an obligation for something we're getting credit for in a replacement tutoring. I don't know what word to call
I
it.
don't understand what
have-
that means. What is the situation what's the pretend situation that applies? Because if it was something like Mandarin, doesn't that become like an independent study?
In most cases, and this is why Dr. Lambert would best speak to it, in most cases that we deal with it, it has to do with a special education student and a parent who wants something unique that doesn't fall within our curriculum. And it's their responsibility to say it's a necessary component. We don't offer it. We believe it's needed. And we would provide time outside of our school day for them to seek those services and then come back.
And that, okay. so
Like,
then
for
that's-
example, pretend situation was you have a reading disability, and there's the Linda, what's it called? It was called something.
Linda Bell.
Yeah, Linda Bell reading thing, and they frankly only offer it locally between like 9 and noon in a reasonable distance. And so you'd either have to go out of school and do it if you wanted, and the school would have to agree that you needed it,
Okay,
etc.
then I guess I'm just stuck in a field not offered in the district, like the word, that's not present, because they are learning.
But it's very exceptional. I mean, I don't think we do it a lot, right?
So it's really, in many ways, you're telling me that we have pull-ups where kids get pulled out for something.
Right.
OT, PT, speech.
Yes.
Right.
Correct. So as you're describing it, it's a parent-provided pull-out in coordination with the
The
district.
parent requested pull-out.
But they're paying for it too.
They would pay for it,
Right.
but we would still have to approve it.
Right,
We
right.
believe it's necessary that it's a necessary
And approved
component.
privately funded pull-out is what it becomes.
Yes. And it's rare.
It is.
It's not trying to get it.
So,
Do you need it? Do you need it at all?
Do we need this policy at all?
Do you need the excusal
Is it
from
required by
school
law?
paragraph, or is that not something that can be managed on
Well,
a case-by-case basis?
I want to think, so I think we have it in I believe it's in our attendance policy.
We have it where?
In the
Attendance.
attendance policy.
Well,
So if it's in attendance, are you covered?
Let me just make sure.
All right, I think this is one that probably can be rethought a little bit, and we're not gonna, I don't think we're gonna get to approval on this one at the next meeting.
Can I ask a question?
Right.
So, Dr. Elliott, you referred to one change being student's qualification must be approved by the superintendent or
designate.
designate. Would that be fair to say that that's going to be consistent with all the policies?
Probably, but maybe not all of them, I don't know.
Not all of them is.
There are some that are governed by state law that don't allow them to put it designate.
Okay, so we could put a blanket definition like they do with the statute that says if it reads superintendent, that includes sort of the name.
So
Because some of them are, we could, unless it's specifically restricted by statute. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
You know, you could actually say, if you said that the office of the superintendent was, the office, not the superintendent, the office of the superintendent is the jointure of the assistant and the superintendent, then we could change in many places to
That's
the
not what I'm
office of the
saying.
superintendent.
I'm saying that where, unless restricted by statute, where it reads superintendent also includes superintendent's designee. Not
Right at the
necessarily
front of the
assistant,
policy and then
because
apply
it could be Barry, it could be anybody else, right?
Member of the cabinet.
Anybody else in the cabinet. So what that's just going to save, I think, is if we have that definition for all our policies, it'll just save one additional step. That's my.
Well, except we'd have to go back and redo all the ones we just approved.
No, we wouldn't, because it's going to be included in.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what we had talked about, or there was a discussion about building a consistent glossary as a policy, so that the terms would be consistent across everything, because different policies refer to the same thing by two different names.
Are we trying to get
So,
another one done?
well, I was
Yeah, I
just going to
think
say
we-
real quick, if you want, in the attendance policy, there is a, number 7 is called tutorial work. It reads, upon written request by the parent, guardian, or other person having control or charge of the child, a student may be excused during school hours for the purpose of receiving tutorial instruction in a field not offered in the district's curriculum. The excused absence shall not interfere with the student's regular program of study, and the qualifications of the instructor shall be approved by the superintendent. So it seems like it covers, that policy is already covered in the attendance.
So you just refer to the attendance policy.
We don't need this at all. And this whole thing about this categorization of the qualifications of the persons offering that course is covered somewhere else or is covered by
No,
law?
it says the study and the qualifications of the instructor shall be approved by the
Just
superintendent.
as approved.
Now, so that's different. So maybe you can leave 116 and make it specific to what we're talking about with providing tutorial lists, et cetera, and then take the other piece out because it's part of attendance.
Because the danger is when you start having the same verbiage in two different policies.
Yeah,
they
conflict.
They can conflict, and
There you
then
go.
neither one is valid, right?
Attendance number.
What's the attendance policy?
204. We should have to make sure when we revise the 204 that we don't take
She
that
just
out.
finished the 200s, so let me make
Okay.
sure that that's still.
Do you want to take this back and revise?
Yep.
So, okay, so 116 will not be coming forward next time.
Jerry, can I ask a question?
More than that, go ahead.
Did we ask this gentleman if he's here for a specific policy? If we can move it up, if you're here for something specific? Or you just want to sit?
My daughter started first grade and I feel like I should be involved.
Oh, what fun times you are in for.
You know.
Where is she in first grade?
What's that?
Where is she in first grade? Okay, nice.
You know,
Awesome.
you know the rule that says if you like sausage or policy, you shouldn't watch either one being made.
I say you'll be a school board member before you know it.
I would say that's how Mr. Thorward started. Now he's
So
a.
I'll be a vegetarian.
You'll be sworn off this. Is there anyone that anybody has, first of all, let me ask the administration, since we're not going to get through many more. Are there any here that are a burning platform that we should look at for calendar? That you must or need to comply with any law? I should have asked that at the outset.
No.
Are there any that are super?
I was, we were going to try and time out.
Super easy that we can
Well,
just check off our list. I'm saying avoid homework.
118 is okay, but
Independent study.
Let's look at 118 and try and get one checked out the box.
One more, Jerry, go for it.
Dr. Elliott, 118. This is independent study.
yes, and I make no recommendations for any changes to what was put forth from TSBA.
I have no comments, it's just a curiosity. How many independent study courses do we generally have in high schools?
Most of those are in our elective areas like tech ed. I know tech ed has 3 or 4. And just so you know, wherever we have an independent study, we've had a board approved curriculum
That's what I
attached
should
to
say,
that.
so it's not. it's-
Yeah, and they take it in numbers of 1. Right now, there could be a student who's taking an independent study and mixed in with a section.
Right.
So that's where that sentence confuses me, and I have to, courses of independent study may not be limited to participation by a single student, but may involve a group of students subject to board approval. It's just,
Can't involve the single student?
it says may not be limited to, it may be, I mean, it's
Always when you do it in the negative, it becomes confusing, so you can just reword it and say, courses may may be by a single student or
Or by-
may involve.
Group of
others.
students.
Yeah.
Right, it's the negative.
It's really,
It really does.
it's really, yeah, it's actually,
You could also say may include.
well, what they're trying to say is one student can't make up a course and that's the only one, and he's the only one who can take it. That's what they're trying to get to, I understand, yes? Would you think?
No, that's exactly what
In fact,
happens.
most of the time, it is a single student.
Well-
It could be one kid or it could be 16.
But, so the kid makes it up and somebody else says, I like that, can I do it too?
We're not gonna say no.
Can we just exit the paragraph?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's what I
just take the
said.
whole paragraph.
I don't see the great reason for it.
Well,
We're not
yes,
limiting it
right.
for, yeah, just take the whole paragraph.
Well, it's actually saying
Sue, are you good
you
with that?
can't limit it to a single, well, that's what it's saying, it may not be
Make
limited.
sure I am.
So
So
we can't say it's okay for Jerry Grubb, but not okay for Wendy Thomas.
Right, exactly, that's what the
I
intent
see.
is.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason why there's these independent studies is because most of the time you don't have enough kids to make a class.
Right.
So we offer it to them through independent study.
Exactly, but my point is that you can't,
You can't approve it for one person and not another.
not another, exactly. Well, except the problem is, there are criteria to get into, which is you have to have certain
I think it's a stupid.
Personal.
You okay with taking it out?
Yep.
That's fine.
I'm not sure.
I think the whole point of that paragraph is to articulate that when we're offering these courses of independent study, we're not saying it's just one kid. That it could be multiple students who are all doing this, at
All
this level
kind of
of
one,
tech ed.
yeah.
There's like 3 students who are at the same point because of what they've taken, and there's not a course for them. So now we're going to give them independent study. So it could be 1 student and then they're part of a larger class, but they're doing independent study, or it could be 3 students who all kind of are at the
But
same
if
point.
we take it out, are we restricted from doing that?
No.
Why not just take the not out? I mean, courses of independent study may be limited to participation by a single student, or it may involve a group of students.
Let's take out the word limited.
Yeah.
And that's the limited is the word.
Okay, may include the
Maybe, right.
Because I think intuitively, when you say independent study, you think of it like as a solo thing, so we're just saying that. it may
Maybe a
include-
single student or
And I
a.
think the not is what, to me, the negative, if you
It's
consider
fine
the
with me.
positive.
All right, so
or-
courses
Courses
of,
evaluated to go?
yes, yes.
So can it not be up to the discretion of the administration? Why have any of the language about it could be 1 or it could be 3?
Yeah, I don't know that we.
Courses of independent study are subject to the,
Well, the board's already
Discretion of the
approved curriculum where we can offer independent study. So that's already, we have, history to what's been
courses
approved.
of independent study are subject to the board.
I wouldn't, you have to take subject to board approval because you folks don't.
Right, so just, I'm
Do
saying,
that.
sometimes we're going
We
too
don't do
far
that. So fine.
together.
Courses of
Whether we're
independent
gonna
study
say
are
to the
subject to
student,
board
they can have
approval.
It
course.
actually narrows what
No,
they can
that
do.
happens before.
That's
yeah.
right, and it takes away their flexibility to say, this is a one-off,
You've approved
And I'm
it.
in.
It's
and
okay.
this is a one-off and I'm out. I'd rather you have the flexibility, have the conversation with us if you feel like you need to, but
I agree with the clarification that independent doesn't necessarily mean by yourself only, because some people may just think that I'm not working in a group on this, I'm working by myself. So if you clarify that, apparently take out subject to board approval because it doesn't apply. That's-
We've already done it earlier.
You've already approved the curriculum. You've
Right,
approved the
right.
curriculum.
Yeah.
So,
Should we just say courses of independent study may not be limited to participation by a single student, period?
No,
no.
No.
courses of independent study may include a single student or a group of students.
That's
Perfect, done.
Period.
That's it.
one line.
Gotta get the kind where when she speaks, it types for you. Hey Siri or Alexa. I love Alexa.
Did you hear about the TV show where the kids?
Yeah.
All right, so that's 118.
Somebody's gotta do it.
We're time boxed. We're gonna try, my day started at 6 a.m. with a call to Fitness,
Stop
so.
talking.
Stop listening. Stop listening. Who invited you to
I
listen?
stop listening.
All right.
With 119, who else is?
No, we're not doing it that way. 'Cause then- What, you want to 119?
No, he doesn't want
We've
to do
got a lot.
that.
We're stopping here.
I read it before.
Well, that's fine. All right, so our next time, let's try and start with the charter school. We'll try and go back and catch up on what we have. There was one last comment before we leave. Matt, you did some research after our previous meeting. The interscholastic athletics, there was a phrasing in there. We pulled it up on 123 because there was some requirement in the PSBA that said you had to have insurance. Matt did the research. That wasn't part of the law, nor is it part of PIAA. It's just PSBA decided that that was a nice thing to include. So we'll revisit that next time to talk about that. And the others, was there a requirement to have the others?
We didn't review 140, 140.1, 143, or 144. They were tabled because they're all required by law. I mean, the law already covers them.
Right.
There's no requirement for us to have policies. They're just, PSBA is recommending we have these policies for clarification, but they're not required.
So what I'll ask you to do between now and the next meeting is please circulate 140, 140.1, 43, and 144 to the board. And if anybody has a burning desire that we should have that policy, let me know and we'll talk about it. Absent anybody saying, oh my God, we need this policy, we'll just pocket veto it. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Yep.
Jerry, I did want to, you brought up on that or the interscholastic athletics about student accident insurance. too.
Right, right.
So Bob called and our students are covered through Council Rock's insurance if they don't have independent insurance. So I think that was, you had a question you had asked.
Right. That was, the policy as proposed by PSBA said that you had to provide proof of insurance.
Be covered by student accident insurance. So they are, whether they have their own.
Well, they initially said, right,
Right.
that initially it didn't sound like it would cover
Right.
that ours would.
Right.
So
Do you want to revisit 123?
we're gonna bring 123 up, yes, we'll talk about it. But I wasn't sure if there were other issues around that. So,
But you had asked that question. and
correct, so
Bob checked
123 will
that
be
out.
up next time. And please take a review for the other ones that we spent, the 140 series, and let me know if you have a burning desire to include it. Otherwise, we'll just let them die. Thank you. Public, wait, go ahead.
I'm sorry, board comment?
Public comment, do anybody want to say anything? Board comment?
Yes. So, I understand the, tax collectors thing was put off until the finance meeting next week. I need everyone to confirm that they will be in attendance next Thursday night. And if you're not, if you're able to call in. I, for the record, am flying that day, so I may or may not be here. If I'm not here, Mark will run the meeting. But I want to make sure we have a minimum of 5 people, since we said we are going to vote in that meeting. Okay, so Andy's already,
I may not be here either. Let me check. Let me see. if I
okay, so
got a
there
ticket.
may,
I may be a call.
there may be no vote, guys. I mean,
We may have to do a special meeting.
I'll certainly be accessible by phone. By phone, potentially?
by phone is fine. My phone works.
You need 5, right?
Yeah.
What we need.
Yes, I will make myself available by phone if you can get me for a 10-minute window.
Okay,
And so I think we'll do it first thing, so we can
absolutely.
make sure we can. If we're not, we'll make a phone call.
And that meeting starts what time?
7 o'clock. 7 o'clock next Thursday. Denise, are you here? I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Okay. Kyle, are you here? I'm here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I'll check with the other board members. I will check with the other board members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thanks, Jerry.